Welcome, everybody. Today we're going to be talking to Akash Tolnai and Mike Wittenstein. They're both experts in the realm of customer experience. Now, they live in very different places. Mike, you live in the United States. Is it Atlanta?
That's right.
Yeah, and Akash lives in Budapest, Hungary. So very different experiences, very different business worlds they come from. But they've managed to find some really interesting similarities in those worlds. A lot of great differences as well, but it's really where they come together, where they find similarities, that we're finding some really interesting topics for conversation. So today we want to talk a little bit about kind of ethics of business success, where the theme for today's conversation is it best for me or is it best for we? So I want to jump in just to let both of you guys introduce yourselves to the community here. So for the readers who are maybe hearing your names for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you guys do? We'll start with you, Mike.
Sure. I'm a 5-time entrepreneur. Before starting Storyminers in 2002, I ran a digital agency in the 90s and worked as IBM's e-visionary right around the turn of the millennium. I'm the founder and the managing partner at Storyminers, and what we do now is we've been in the customer experience business for 15 years, and we're very good at helping leaders make their brands come alive, help them get clear on their stories and their ideas and their strategies, and convert those into experiences that their employees and their customers can become a part of. We've worked with about 800 companies, and we've seen about $2,000 in value, $2 billion in value creation for our clients.
That's excellent, excellent. And Akash, tell us a little bit about who you are.
We run a consulting company called Ability Matrix since 2010, and we're at the intersection of customer experience and innovation, and we help companies with product market fit, go-to-market strategies, and kind of figuring out what would be the best innovation built around customer rationality and behavioral economics.
Oh, excellent. That's again, very interesting introductions, guys. Okay, so I want to know a little bit about how each of you would define customer experience, say, just for the average business owner.
I'll do that one first.
What's important to know there?
Right. A layman's definition is that customer experience is everything the business does to their customers and everything it does for them.
Okay.
If you subtract everything you do for them and you subtract everything you do to them, the bad stuff, waiting in line, the hassle, the friction, then you kind of get the value of that customer experience to them. And it's all about how the business and the brand makes them feel.
Excellent. Would you say that's a good definition for you as well, Akash, or do you have anything to add there?
I agree with that. Probably I would add that it's about understanding customer perception and understanding people. So just, if you're coming from a marketing background, it is very similar to marketing, except it's not just communication or no communication at all, rather than substance and how you use the substance to create the experience or the emotions.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So I want to dive right in here. We're obviously recording this at the beginning of 2021, and it's been the end of a pretty crazy year. 2020 was a pretty crazy year for businesses and for just individuals all over the planet. So the global pandemic, the COVID pandemic, has definitely raised the stakes. When we need honest and substantive communication more than ever, but there seems to be a movement in the opposite direction. So how would you grade your respective countries on how they've communicated during the pandemic, from what you know in customer experience there?
Should I go ahead? I guess.
Yeah, you can go first, Mike.
What I see is that most of the communication happens from the perspective of fear. What leaders fear that the population will do or will not do, and because of that, it's just avoiding fear and avoiding risks, and not really treating people as adults.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, kind of not being there when they need to find support or someone to lean on. And obviously that would be the politics, parties, just people running the countries, or even the business leaders.
Yeah, for both sides. Yeah. So you would give like both, well, your own country, Hungary, but also we've all been watching what's going on in the United States as well. Would you give both countries a failing grade, or do they barely pass in terms of communicating? Has Hungary been better at this, do you think, or?
I don't know, probably if you ask Mike, he might say that we are doing better, but I don't feel that any country is doing good. I mean, there is no better or worse. Almost every country around the world is failing in that regard.
Okay.
So just, they don't seem to have kind of constant communication. Have you ever heard about politicians calling each other, okay, what should be our common understanding of the situation? Or, what if we would start communicating together that we are into this, the whole world? So let's try to solve this as kind of a unity, and maybe tell our people the same stuff.
Yeah.
Just go everyone the individual way. Mike?
Yeah, that unity is interesting. That if we were to solve this as one force, kind of like collectively, then that needs to start with communication, right? The communication, strong communication, for top-down communication is going to be kind of a compelling force for that.
Yeah.
Like it needs to start with that communication. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, as a letter grade, just before we switch to you, Mike, there, Akos, as a letter grade, would you give them a D, like a Hungary, or an F? Or do they literally like 100% failure on that?
I would rather go with K or.
Yeah, like beyond. Okay, like they got.
Oh, with H for Hungary. That's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, what about you, Mike? How do you feel?
Well, if you're giving Hungary a K, I think we have to give the United States a U.
Yeah,
it's just terrible. It's well known what's going on, and it's so weird that so many people seem unable to wrap their hands around it. It seems like the population and average people understand better than the folks who are supposedly in charge. So I think what's going on, well, first of all, I'll give you the grade. It's totally failing. Why would we have the greatest, we have more COVID cases percentage-wise than any other country. We have higher infection rates. Today, the day we're doing this, what's the day, the 28th? Of January, we're starting to see a little bit of a decline in cases. We're up to about 1 million vaccinations a day. That's amazing. But most of that work, that good work, has happened since the change in the presidency. So here's what I think was going on. For a long time, we've been past the point where our infrastructure and the way it's designed can handle the scope, the speed, and the size of the problems that we have. It's been way out of whack for decades. So what we've got now is a global problem, and we don't have a global solution. We don't have a global infrastructure for addressing pandemics. We don't have a global infrastructure for moving medical supplies, for improving education, for handling regional and super regional water problems. We're using our old, made in our grandfathers or great-grandparents' time tools to get things done. And the in-between play, in my opinion, is politics. Politics is wonderful when you're trying to come up with compromises. You don't want to go to a war, so you compromise and you bring in folks who have political skill, and somehow they make things work. The problem now, in my opinion, is, and this is true quite in a number of countries around the world, is we've got this entrenchment. It's almost like the political parties are fighting a war. They're against each other. We feel that in the United States with the Democrats against the Republicans and the Republicans against the Democrats. And even right now, after we had that terrible riot on the Capitol, there are people who have done seditious things that are continuing to speak, and they're not being censored. We have bad behavior everywhere. It's nutty. Let me add one more thought there.
Yeah, go ahead.
One more thought. We also have a separation between fact and fiction.
Yeah.
It's very hard to tell the difference. So we know that social media is kind of it's not the fault of social media, but we have this pulling apart that's happening in a number of different ways. In my opinion, science and politics should not be sleeping together. That's one of our biggest challenges, but go ahead.
Is there the possibility for compromise? Is there, like, you talk about that polarization of the blue and red in the United States.
I can answer that.
And you probably see something similar in Hungary between.
I think compromise sucks.
Yeah.
It's awful because it's not a solution to everybody gets more of what they want. When you're in a pandemic, everybody needs to be safe and healthy and vaccinated. Mm-hmm. Everybody. It's not about one way or another way of doing things. It's the best design is the one that gives everybody more of what they need. Yeah, are we capable of that? Yeah. Yes, but we need different tools to do it. We're using our old political tools, our old investments, our old investor thinking. We're using old metrics and old organization styles to solve problems that nobody could have imagined 20 years ago, much less when a lot of these organizations and models were founded hundreds of years ago. So it's time for a reboot, like in the Microsoft world. If it doesn't work, you go to the start button, which is odd, and then you shut down. I don't know why they do that. It should have another way to do that. And then you kind of restart.
Communication, Mike, that it's not reboot, it's start.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want the same thing. It's not repair or replace, it's reinvent.
Yeah, if you just consider the whole situation that politics was driving execution in terms of infrastructure, medical services, in some cases, the key areas where the scientific research should be done with government funding. But in such a situation, you have to change that. Experts have to drive how politicians communicate, because in the end, what is politics? Communication.
Yeah.
And if you fail in politics, all you have to do is communicate something else. But if you fail in the pandemic, okay, what do you tell? It wasn't 12,000 people dying. You have the numbers wrong. Mm-hmm. Or just it's not how you solve a pandemic.
No, having experts in that driving seat, that would I think make a huge difference. So I'm going to put you two in the driver's seat then. So what from customer experience, like your experience in that realm, how would you have done things differently? How would you have approached, especially in terms of communication, top-down communication from governments and they're kind of the face of the administration? How would you have changed how they were communicating? I'll start with you, Akos. Maybe talk about the Hungarian example here. How would you have, if you were the expert in the room and they were listening to experts, how would you have, what have you told them to do? How would you have approached the public with this massive problem we've never seen before?
Let's put it straight. I'm not an expert, so I would probably invite experts and rely on them. But in customer experience, we say that it all starts with employee experience. And in that regard, your citizens are your employees, and you have to empower them and make them feel secure. And first of all, people or politicians, decision makers should have understood how people fear. What are the biggest fears? What are the insecurities? Where the scientific approach or the scientific opinion and the public perception differs, and how to bridge that, how to help the scientists bridge the understanding gap between the people and the science, because that's communication. Here in Hungary, during the first wave, which was pretty silent, so almost no death, no one from the political parties wore a face mask.
Yeah.
Imagine the second wave, when they try to convince everyone to wear masks all the time when on the streets. I don't know, how much would you trust someone who just told you, and just leading by example, not wearing masks during spring, and all of a sudden trying to convince you that, hey guys, we really need to wear these masks. And I implore you that you really need to wear the mask. It's not legit.
That's, they're having similar problems in the United States now. Mike, maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
They turned the masks themselves into a political issue. They turned the wearing of masks. They actually communicated this, that it was like, that they were, right-wing media, et cetera, that they were teasing Biden for wearing a mask in public, like trying to put this as some kind of weakness on the part of who's at that point the candidate. So how would you, if you'd been that communication expert in the room, Mike, how would you have kind of changed the communication strategy from the White House there?
Right. Well, there's been such a big change since we've had a change in our presidency. It's so much more positive right now. I'm also not a healthcare communications expert. I know some people who are, and I have so much more admiration for what they can do. What I can do is I can talk to you from a design perspective and show you how some of the customer experience tools can be used to address a first-of-a-kind problem that's way out of scale for an organization. So I'm going to approach it from that perspective, and please forgive me if I make mistakes on a global basis and I'm under epidemiology and things like that. So here's the thing. We're designing, when you're doing customer experience design, not the research, not the customer understanding. Akosh is wonderful at doing that, and we both have chops. We're both good at a lot of different areas. He gets that better than I do. But there comes a point when you have enough data and you have to make decisions about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. In my opinion, the customer experience tool set is optimal for that moment in time, because it forces you to look not just at one person's needs, which is what we've had for so many months now with so many countries and so many authoritarian leaning personalities. They think me before we. What's best for me? How can I get elected? What do my special interests want? They kowtow, they bend over to these others' interests, and they use politics to kind of come up with what for them is the best answer. Former President Trump has been called up many times and seen on video doing exactly those kinds of things. So the best design is where everybody gets more of what they want. So customer experience design would be about thinking about the end state that's ideal for everyone, which is everyone's had their 1 or 2 shots in the arm and we're all healthy. Okay? Working back from that, how do you get to that point? So you figure out that the citizen is the hero in the story. It's not the politician. It's not Moderna or Pfizer. It's not the vaccine. It's not the frontline healthcare workers. It's the citizen, because they're the ones that we're looking to make the change, and they're the ones that can get the biggest benefit. And by the way, all the doctors and healthcare workers and researchers and all of those folks are citizens too. So it really is, it's in my opinion, the right place to focus. So with them as the hero in the story, you think about what is it like for them to be healthy again? What's it like for them to have access to the things they used to have freedom of travel, to be able to work and do the things that they need to spend personal time with friends and family? And you work back from there. Well, to do that, what do you need to do? Well, you have to have had a vaccine, maybe 2. You have to be able to get to it. You have to not be afraid of it. You have to understand when it's your turn, and so on and so on and so on. I think you get the pattern right now. So experience design works by thinking about what the needs on the outside are and bringing those all the way back to the inside of a company or a government and organization, and then making the changes on the inside so that you can push that out. Here's the thing that most people don't recognize. And Akosh, I promise to give you a turn in just a second. I'm almost wrapping up. What people don't realize is that the end game is not for them to win. Think leaders of companies. They want their stock prices to be as high as possible. The best thing for leaders to do in a pandemic or in any other first of a kind crisis is not to think about themselves, not me, but think about we first. What's the outcome for everybody that needs to happen, and then govern your efforts accordingly. It's so easy to do a one-sided win. You can be a bully, You can be belligerent. You know, you can go to war with people. You can cheat and steal. You can take over systems of all different kinds electronically. Those are easy, easy, easy solutions. The really hard ones are when you have to change how you work so that you can create value for the people that you serve. And that's the situation that we're in. That was my opening comment. Our tools, our systems, our organizations are out of scale, and they're too old for the needs that we have. So once you design with the needs of your constituents, citizens, and you bring that back in, you have to make those changes. And that's exactly what's happening right now in the United States with activating this, I forgot what it's called, the War Powers Act, which allows the government to demand that certain manufacturers switch over their production to things that are needed for the nation's best interest, things like that. So we've got a lot of those provisions in place, and I'm hoping that that's going to make a difference. You know, we're at about 1 million vaccine doses a day. Hopefully we'll be at 1.5 and then 2 and then 3. And that hopefully what we're learning and building together around the world can then kind of spread out. And the last thought before I give you the microphone back is another principle of customer experience design is learning. Communication is really important, but you want to learn because nothing stays the same. It's the big difference between conservatives and progressives is one group wants things to stay the same, but the fact is things are changing faster than our political preferences are. So hopefully we'll be able to learn and push this stuff out. So the next pandemic, which everybody believes is already being brewed up somewhere, will be much easier to fight.
Well, is this, Akos, I want to ask you if maybe the current moment, with the pandemic, et cetera, but not just the pandemic, but also the current political moment in both Hungary and the United States, is this maybe having us reevaluate the relationship between needs and wants? With like from that customer perspective, you want to give them what they want. Like a customer, they have these wants, but Mike was talking a lot there in that last section about how the needs have changed. And especially in times of a global pandemic, we need to find some way to break through and talk to people about what they need rather than just what they want. And maybe those two are in conflict. Do you see any relevance there?
Just getting back to what Mike started, the keyword is global. So since World War II, we really didn't have anything similar where all the population of Earth experienced something gruesome pretty much at the same time.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about design and designing solution for that, the reason you should be leaning on business-infused solutions or solutions that are based on global companies is that this is a global scale. So when we're talking about we, it's not we Hungarians or we Americans, it's we Earthlings.
Yeah.
And just to design something on such a grand scale cannot happen from the perspective of one country leader or the other country leader. And for that, kind of understanding where the different cultures and different nations are and how to communicate. What is just the gap I mentioned? What is the gap between the scientific understanding and the scientific solution and the customer understanding and the customer needs? So the needs of the population. Because in some countries, it's very easy. They trust the scientists, and whatever the scientists say, they do it. It doesn't mean that the scientists are always right, but you have to put your face into someone who is a professional and not a professional communicator. And obviously you have to be agile and, try something, fail with something. And it's very tough to say that, especially if you are personally involved or you have lost someone, but we are fighting something that we didn't even know existed. Didn't even, except for a handful of people, couldn't even imagine that this would happen. So this is where you have to figure out the best solutions that are right now available and work on a grand scale. And this is kind of cutting edge solutions. And if you think of cutting edge solutions, startups, customer experience, business design, some of the scientists that are at the forefront of, yeah, Mike?
No, keep going. I just want to go next. I have an add-on comment.
So that is very important, that you somehow.
Sorry, Akash, can you finish the thought there? You said scientists who are on the cutting edge of design, and I was riveted there.
Because you have to figure out how you can mix methods that work on a grand scale, and that comes from business, especially startup scaling globally, large companies doing global operations.
Yeah.
Also the flow of information, because some of the larger companies like Apple had information based on their subsidiaries in China and could pretty much prepare what's going to happen in all the different countries. And despite the fact that you could see what's happening at Apple or Microsoft or any other large multinational company, the governments didn't really take action. So how you mix the knowledge and the vision of problem solving of scientists with the scaling methods and design methods of large businesses. That's the key, and just switching the focus from different countries to Earth.
Let me just add on to that, and then Brian, I'll give you control back. An example of what you just said would be that right now we've got at the state level lots of experiments going on, at the school district level, at what we call counties, which are similar to provinces. We have experiments going on, but to the best of my knowledge, we don't have real-time understanding about what's working and what's not. Nobody's paying attention at a grand scale with design and machine learning and all of that to help turn all those miniature experiments into collective knowledge that we could use to make those personalized and individualized decisions so that each community could have more of what it wants. That's an example of a new capability that needs to come into play so that we can all do better. So.
Yeah, I really like that idea. And it connects, I think, directly to what we're saying about me versus we, right? Like when you've got, and it's just on a slightly larger scale, when you have a community that's not getting from the top on that kind of, especially global, but even in terms of the country, when from the top you're not getting clear guidelines, you're not getting or the advice you're getting or the suggestions you're getting from at the federal level, it just doesn't cut the mustard. It's not good enough. So they're forced to. I'll finish. They're forced to make that decision for what's good for us, what works for us, because there's not enough of a coherent overall strategy.
Yeah, and there are two parts to that, in my opinion, or at least two things come to my mind. I'm sure there are many more parts. I don't think the people that are running the show have the right dashboards. I think they're looking at a very limited amount of information. So their ability to understand cause and effect is very limited. And I think they substitute the me for the we. They may have good intent, but they just can't see it. Akash mentioned something before. You picked up on the question, Brian, around wants and needs. And when you get to that kind of point and you have to make a choice because lives are at stake, because trillions of dollars or euros are being deployed, that's when I think the politicians should come in. But even more than politicians, to help us make those, fine-tuned adjustments, I think that's when we need leadership. And leadership has to be rooted, in my opinion, in the needs of their constituents, not in their own egos, not in their own betterment, not in their own personal advancement during the time of their term in office. So I think we're all starting to see that.
Yeah, one of the big problems we've seen, I'll throw this next question to you, Akash. One of the big problems we've seen on that political level is hypocrisy, where the communication doesn't line up with their own behaviors, right? So what they're saying and what they're doing is very different. So in England, for instance, there was the minister or something like that who just finished telling people that they can't go be with their families, and then he's off driving with his family to go, on a little vacation. We're seeing this kind of hypocrisy in a lot of different places, and it's most obvious, I think, in the political sphere. So, Akos, do you see the hypocrisy being as large a problem in the business world as it is in the political one? It's an obvious problem in the political one, but is it also is hypocrisy as large a problem in the business world that you've experienced?
I think the business world is putting this behind, especially with the focus on customer experience. So, you know, you can lie just so many times until the customers figure out that the promise doesn't really match the actual value delivered. And because of that, customer experience is gaining momentum, and the leaders who are really focusing on customer experience just make sure that it's not about communication rather than really understanding what is the value for the customer or the constituent and delivering that value. And the other thing that politicians can learn from companies, especially in the customer experience field, is that you are able to assess the feelings or emotions of people real time. There are tools for that. There are methods for that. Mm-hmm. So you could pretty much follow the conversation that goes around these topics and see where the general sentiment is, and base your communication and actions from that perspective. And one other thing is just getting back to the dashboard Mike mentioned, is that there is no common descriptor what is counted as a COVID death. So for each country, they have different statistics. So even if you want to try to compare how we are doing or whether we should do the same measurements, one extreme is Belgium, where anyone who they believe is somehow related to COVID is counted as a COVID death, as far as I know. And in Hungary, you have no idea. I mean, there is rumor about people not getting just a standard surgical procedure because of COVID protocol and dying because of that. Again, this is just rumor, but if it's not counted as a COVID death, then how do you compare stats?
I think we should return, or maybe explore it right now. This idea, you brought something up there that's really interesting, which is rumor, and how rumor, like we talked about this earlier as well, about the using facts and letting the experts kind of drive the conversations. But in the world of social media, in the world of kind of the explosion of distrust of kind of major media sources, rumor seems to be as important as what we I don't want to call it just facts, but more of that top-down communication. So the communication you're getting from at the federal level, from the governments, from hopefully expert-driven communication, is having to contend with rumor. Maybe you want to take this, Mike?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to tackle that one because there's so many intertwined elements to what you're talking about right there. So I'll just try, and Akos and Brian too, maybe you guys can pitch in and fill in some of the gaps I'm about to leave. I think that people have an innate desire to feel okay. I think they also want to feel joy. And I think they also want to be connected to their communities, to their world, to the interests that they find around them. For the longest time, people have used gossip, rumors, inside trading as a kind of a tip or a hint at what's to come, because it simplifies decision making. You don't have to think so hard. You don't have to do as much research. If your friend tells you it's true, and they've been right in the past, then you just kind of go along with that. I think a lot of people now are very, very afraid, and they're not able to exhibit, share, showcase, or pinpoint what's making them afraid. And I think a lot of that is why people are swinging more and more to the rumors. I also feel there's a lot of bias in there. I have a friend named Graham Newell. Akash would love to meet him because of the behavioral science background, but he's done some really deep, business level studies, if you will, on the different kinds of bias. And it's amazing how we trick ourselves all the time. So I can understand why people feel so adamantly about their rumors being true. But here's the thing, and let's tie this back to trust. Here's the thing where customer experience can help us out. And I think that's the theme for our day, is how can some of these tools help us get out of some of the problems that we're in? What brands need to do is make promises. That's their job. If you use this soap, you will feel cleaner and fresher. Mm-hmm. Their businesses have to deliver on that. So brands call the shot. They say, this is where we're going. This is what we're going to do for you. But all the details in their business have to deliver that. And the more you do that right, the better your brand. The worse you do that, the more quickly you go out of business. In a political perspective, we don't have accountability between people in leadership roles who make promises and how they deliver. I have a cousin named Dave, and he suggested to me that the politicians declare that they're going to balance the budget. And he says, well, if you don't do that, we're not going to pay you.
Yeah.
There's no accountability there. And between the parties here, there's not accountability. So there's no outcome that they're beholden to. They've got all these laws and all these codes and restrictions and funny rules and stuff like that around voting and everything else, but they're not held accountable for achieving some kind of an outcome. All of that comes back around to the notion of, if you're not accountable for what you say, you can say anything. So we've kind of like let the genie out of the bottle without reprimanding folks who are doing harm. Last point, at the end of the day, it's all about, at any business, any government, any individual, you're here to create value for others. And if you figure out how to deliver that value first, then you can take value for yourself. You can profiteer, you can optimize your operations and things like that. But when we're solving first of a kind, pandemic level, world scale challenges, we have to figure out what's the value that we're creating. And customer experience is amazing at focusing all the attention right on the person that makes it go, which is the customer. In our case, it's the world citizen. I hope that helps, and you guys can fill in some gaps there.
Yeah, no, I think that the lesson there is the customer experience, that the expectations of the customer on the company is this accountability, is that the promises the company makes need to translate to what the customer experience is, right? That what the business does to and for the customer, those things need to line up with what the brand says it's going to do to and for the customer. And you don't see that kind of accountability in politics. That it's like that the political world, it's not that the political world can teach the customer experience, it's the customer experience, the success in there can translate to a more honest political success. And like especially success in terms of the governed, not so much the people who do the governing, but the governed as well.
Yeah. I think citizens want to know that they're safe, and they want their children to also have a life that's good or better than theirs. Yeah. And that's an implicit kind of expectation from leaders. I don't think it's written down in anybody's constitution that, my life will be good. But I think that's what everybody's hoping for right now, and they're not getting it. So they're coming up with new ways to feel like they're a little closer to that goal.
Yeah.
Akash, what are you thinking?
That, just buying into this promises fulfilled story is that brands that are strong on fulfilling promises are transparent with regards to the information that helps you understand that they delivered on the promise. So customer experience can help politicians on where to be transparent. So just maybe I'm naive, and in such a pandemic, you just can't share all the information with everyone, but some of the information should be accessible to everyone. And this again taps into something that businesses already know, that the more people you share the information, the raw data with, the more solutions you're going to come up with, the more perspectives, the faster you reach your goal, different understandings, that kind of stuff. So promises, accountability, and transparency to be able to enforce that accountability. And from that point on, if you just put all the data up and available for everyone, that helps to make you accountable. Accountability happens.
Yeah.
You also get the wisdom of
Just-
crowds, because when lots of people look at the same data set, there are a few people that are going to figure out things that most others can't see. And usually those are the very valuable, insights.
Insights, yeah. Of course, you were going to say something?
That just kind of transparency and the data information available to a lot of people will put pressure on the system to be accountable. So you don't have to kind of make extra effort and put in some extra measures to keep people accountable, because just the transparency on information will enable this.
Excellent, very good. So the lessons might be, but better applied, moving from customer experience to the political world. But I imagine the current climate, this very hyper political climate we're in right now, it's teaching you something about the customer experience. What lessons are you taking out of this current climate and applying, or how are you applying them to the customer experience problems you're dealing with?
Me first, okay. I believe this pandemic proves that customer experience can work on a global scale, and that we are more the same than different. So everyone is telling you that there are cultural differences, that every country is working different. Although when Mike and me are speaking, we figure out that we have the same fears, the same problems, and even have the same ideas on how this can be solved. And I have been talking the last few months from all around the world, people from Japan, India, Pakistan, you name it. Whatever country, the same mindset, the same problem with communication, politicians. So yeah, customer experience and everything that is kind of science that customer experience builds on can be applied globally and should be used in different areas and not just business.
Yeah, great answer.
I love that. I can't say it better. I'll just try to add a couple of things, because I feel like you asked me the question, so I have to say something. That customer experience thinking is, I think it's like an umbrella way of looking at the world. There's so many different ways to see things. There's total quality, there's digital marketing and transformation, there's education, there's so many different specialties. But what ties everything together, just like an umbrella protects you from the rain, is a focus on customers and employees. Now you can translate that to citizens and politicians and scientists and whatever other audiences that you want. But at the core of all of this is design thinking, which is all about understanding everyone's needs and realizing that the best solutions aren't the ones that advantage one group or one person. They're the ones that help everyone get more of what they want. That's good design. And to improve your ability to design, you have to improve your dashboard. You have to get clearer about the objectives of your organization, or in this case, your world. What is it that you're striving for? You have to be willing to make some changes to how you work and what you do and how you prioritize, so that these new, first of a kind, now more important than ever outcomes for citizens of the world can be achieved. And we're still in a world where people will not subjugate themselves to someone else's needs, even the littlest bit. We're seeing that in the far right extremist groups. They're afraid, so they won't collaborate. There's no interest in that, because they only see the downside. They can't see yet what the upside would be if they participate differently. So, and I think that's where Akosh's ideas of communication and clarity, sincerity, transparency all need to come to play, because each person in the world, in my opinion, sees themselves as the hero in their own journey. And customer experience will let us look at each person as that hero and communicate with them using new tools that we need to create so that each person can kind of advance the way they need to, so that not only are they feeling better off, but they're also able to make a better contribution to all of us.
That's really good. I was going to talk to you about a little bit about code switching in terms of talking one way with your colleagues and another way with your customer. But this is kind of opening up new avenues for that conversation. So I want to ask you instead about code switching for different groups of customers. If you were talking to somebody, and because of the political climate that we're kind of rotating around in this conversation, when you're talking to the right and to the left, can you talk one language to everybody, or do you need to get adept at code switching? Do you need to address first this group of customers and then that group of customers with a very different language, saying the same thing, but in different ways for different sets? Does that make sense?
No, that's a brilliant question. I love that question. I'm going to need a minute to think about it. So Akash, you're up.
So I don't have a minute to think about.
Yeah, I can rephrase the question.
No,
I was thinking about it as
not at all.
Yeah.
I'm fine. When communicating to large masses, we try to oversimplify stuff so that it doesn't get misunderstood. But there is a difference between clarity and simplification, and sometimes people mix up clarity with simplification. And you have to provide information on a level that is, clarifying enough for one group or the other, and not oversimplifying. And using what we do, behaviorist science, you can pretty much prioritize the different groups. And there are all the different tools that can help you understand what is their level of complexity. Because obviously, if someone is more deeper into a field or a problem, or just more of an, let's say, analytical thinker, then the level of clarity required and the information that you need to provide that level of clarity might differ. So there is a difference in communication, but there are tools to help you create behavioral-based groups, prioritize those groups, either how easy it is to make them switch code, or switch behavior, or not really switch behavior, but influence their understanding of the situation. Who is the easiest to reach? What is probably the biggest impact group? For example, if you have a network topology map between different groups or people, so that is network science. If you are using network science, it is way easier to understand, okay, what are the first messengers I need to talk to? And what is the level of complexity that I need to have for the clarity for that group? I don't know.
For that, yeah. Great. Mike?
Akash,
Is
thank you
enough time? You need
absolutely. And Akash,
just take a long drink of water, or
And Akash, I owe you one. So the next time you get a hard question, you can just pass it to me. Okay, you have a point for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about code switching, you can imagine that the person using different ways of speaking or communicating can have good intent or bad intent. And you have to know that you have to trust the person that's doing the communicating, or the group, or the government. So if you don't believe that they have your interests at heart, code switching is not going to bring them together. You get different messages for different groups. It's not so cool. If you believe that your leadership is taking good care of you, citizens will give people the latitude to do that, and they won't mind being part of a group for a little bit of time. But here's the thing that could work even better, and I'm stretching a little bit beyond the end of the plank of my pirate ship here, and I might jump in the water, and I'm not a healthcare communicator, so please don't jump and do this. But I'm about to share a technique that we've used in business that helps for transformation of very complex things. Typically, we think that the leader does the communication, and they tell everybody, here's what we want you to do, here's why, here's what's going to happen, and then everybody falls into a line. Well, you know, it's not that easy anymore. No leader for a medium or large size company is capable of understanding what each of their people is going through. At a world level, you know, no president or prime minister is capable of knowing what's going on in the minds of all their citizens, much less people of planet Earth. So what you can do, like Akos talked about, is you can understand what your different groups are. You can divide them by sentiment, by affinity, in a whole bunch of different ways. And you can find an exemplar, an ambassador from that group to share the story that comes from above, you know, that like wear your masks, you know, and you need a singer to do it and a dancer.
An influencer. You need like that. That's good.
Yes, but there's one more part to this that goes a little bit deeper, and it's worth listening to. I hope. Let me share this part, and you guys let me know if you like this or not. But instead of having people tell each other what to do, which is the traditional like management, the board tells the management tells mid-management, they tell the front line, somebody tells the press, somebody talks to customers. What you want to do, or what you can consider, is giving some of your influencers, I'll call them representatives, and I don't mean that politically, but just people, normal people within these different groups, give them the experience of going through the change that you're proposing and let them tell their story. This is what I heard. This is what I thought. This is what I decided. This is what I encountered. This is what happened to me. I had to make this change. I had this setback. I realized something new, and here's where I am now. So if you let lots of people have the experience of transforming positively and let that kind of share inside the company and let those people be the spokesperson, it creates a lot faster connection. It's much more believed, and it happens at scale a lot faster.
That's excellent.
So you empower storytellers. You don't just tell more.
Yeah, I like that idea of empowering storytellers rather than giving them a story to then where it's the hierarchical model where at the top you give the story, and then that story, it's like the game of telephone, right? It goes down through each level, changing slightly at each level, but the idea is that it should pass through to the customer exactly as the person at the top imagined it. But you, instead of that, giving somebody the opportunity to have that full experience with whatever you're trying to maybe sell, or even whether you're selling it politically, convincing, whatever it is, you empower them to have an experience that they can then put in their own words. They can translate.
It shifts the attention from I can't or why not, or to why not, or I see that somebody's already done that. That path is easy for me. You know, it took like hundreds of years for somebody to break the 4-minute mile, and I can't remember the runner's name, but after that, a whole bunch of people broke the 4-minute mile.
Because they saw it was possible,
They felt
it's that mental block of being like, this is not possible for me. Then it becomes possible,
And when lots of people are succeeding, these storytellers that you're empowering, you're going to kind of pick one to follow because you like them. It's like movie reviews. You have certain movie reviewers that you trust because over time you've noticed that their taste and your taste are similar, so you'll kind of follow them. It's the same thing with internal storytellers.
Okay, I want to ask Akos a question. You've got more? Do you have something you want to add?
Add something that just build on top of what Mike just said, is the reason why stories and storytellers work that well and can ignite change is that stories connect on the emotional level. And if you want to change people, move people, create a momentum or build on a momentum, then you have to make that on the emotional level. And that's exactly what politicians are good at. Expect mostly for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, exactly. They've used stories to to raise the temperature. The stories have been used in the wrong way. And Biden, in his inaugural address, Mike, he talked about lowering the temperature. In our conversations, in the climate, etc. So maybe I'll start with you, Akos. Do you think there's for you with your behavioral science background, is there anything you can tell us about how we can lower the temperature, how we can bring this down to maybe through stories, through conversations? What kind of stories do we need to have to bring the conversation down?
I guess Mike is
I'll take that one. I'll use that point.
You don't have to take it. I just can't tell us about stories, but there are different stories. There are several short-term stories.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember how we uploaded the medical workers and the medical stuff and how it all stopped because you got used to the pandemic and you just burnt out. And then there are stories that can hold on for longer, just like stories from the past about great rulers or stories about World War veterans or from veterans. And you need to find stories that have a longer arc and just can somehow bring together people with a long-term goal. Because change and behavioral change doesn't happen if it's forced. It has to happen because of mutual, not even interest, mutual support. Kind of building a social group around the same emotion, because a tribe is just partially about goals or values. In fact, it's about the emotional interpretation of values. And that creates a tribe, and the tribe behaves pretty much the same way.
Yeah.
And you can influence this tribe mentality, the tribe emotional core through stories and change that through stories. So by telling different stories, you change the core of the emotional core of a tribe, and then the tribe will change or behave differently.
Would you say, like, particularly I really love what you said about making the arch longer.
Yeah.
Right. That having stories, instead of having a story that's wrapped up in a moment, in a particular feeling I'm having right now.
Yeah.
That stretching that out and making it, again, it connects to what we're talking about me versus we, this kind of global idea, is telling bigger stories, telling broader stories that reach more people and that connect. Like it's a bigger bridge. It can connect more people. It's a bigger arc.
Yeah.
When people realize that they're part of a bigger narrative, that's an amazing feeling. It happens when you're like 6, when you're 9 or 10, when you're in your late 20s, and it can happen anytime in addition to that. But those are the times that I hear people report it the most. But they realize, oh my gosh, this is my role in the world, or this is how the world works for me, or how I work with it. And that's part of the human condition. It's one of our most joyful times, and we have precious few of those. So when the world is ablaze, we have a phrase that's become popular here, a dumpster fire, which is it's one of those opportunities to not just lower the temperature, but to raise the opportunity for better outcomes. Yeah, because people they're in that moment where they realize, oh my God, how did we get here? And they, instead of just going, well, let's just get rid of that bad feeling, it's more like, well, where can we go next? It's a chance to like shed all of your baggage, pick a new course, where do you want to go? So I think that one of the things that our politicians and leaders can do is be much more mindful about the stories that they share with us, and not just say things to manipulate us for their small individual advantage, for a little bit more wealth or power or longer time in office or something like that, but really help us rise to more noble aspirations where we can work together as a global community. Who's talking about that? That was really popular when the United Nations formed. I'd love to hear more conversation about that. I'd love to see more exchange programs, especially at a professional level, where people can like interact and learn what Akos and I have, that, even at our ages, that we're so much more alike, and citizens of Earth are just so much more in the same situation that they've ever been before. This pandemic is forcing us to see that.
But it's an opportunity, and in some ways, right? It's a terrible moment for a lot of people, a lot of loss, a lot of suffering out there. But it is an opportunity to make some more, some big changes, and to try to make those changes permanent. I want to close with this. I'll start with Akos, and we'll let you kind of put the punctuation mark at the end there, Mike. But Akos, if we make changes to how we think, you talk a lot about mindset. You know, and I know that's important to use, changing mindsets. If we extend the arch, you know, tell bigger stories and reach more people and try to think more globally. If we start doing that, if we start feeling progress towards that, what can we do to make those changes permanent? How can we prevent backsliding? How can we prevent the changes from being just momentary? How can we keep those going?
I don't think you can change the world in a moment, but you can start an initiative at any moment. And I guess our duty or our responsibility is to start it and not really worry about where it gets us, or how sustainable this is, or whether it will get results or not. You know, our responsibility is to put what we know to use and start a change, and don't worry about, you know, whether this will be a good result or not. If you look at through an agile lens, then you don't have to worry about the result, because if you worry too much how long it will take, or will we ever get there, then you don't start. And it's all about starting. Maybe it will be just 5 people worldwide, but for the next pandemic, we are 5 more. And, you know, maybe we will make a step or 2 in the wrong direction. But again, discovering a dead end will be worth much more for the next pandemic. What worked, what didn't work, and it really doesn't matter. What matters is that we change our view on how we look at each other, people of Earth, citizens of Earth, and just make the first step. That's it.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. All right, Mike.
What was the question?
I want to know if we start doing these things, if we start actually making the changes, the kind of changes we've been proposing, you know, throughout this talk here, like telling bigger stories, start focusing on we instead of me, you know, all this kind of globalizing our vision and even perhaps our solutions. If we start moving in that direction, how do we make that movement permanent? How do we keep the direction going and not just like have a pendulum swing?
Okay. All right. There's a phrase that I learned when I was studying Russian that I didn't really understand until much later. It's повторение мать учения, and it's repetition is the mother of learning. If you really want things to sink in, you have to do them over and over and over. Think Russian gymnasts, skaters, pianists. You know, they're like amazingly good. You know, the whole education system was based on that. You know, here we have things a little bit differently, but there's one thing that I learned from that makes a lot of sense in terms of kind of letting the pendulum kind of dwell a little bit over on the good side.
Yeah.
And that's to make sure that you repeat the right stories. Okay. So we've seen a whole bunch of examples in social media, you know, where this tragedy didn't happen, or the Holocaust didn't happen, or people didn't land on the moon. And the more they get repeated, the more they become real. The, you know, hundreds of thousands or 60,000 or whatever the number of lies Trump was documented telling, the more people hear that, the more it becomes real. So from a systemic, from a you know, large system design perspective, from a customer experience perspective, the one thing that we have to do is get good at harvesting stories and people's connection to the outcomes that matter to them. If we harvest the stories, that's one little thing that we can do. And there's a group, I think it's based in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, called StoryCorps, STORYCORP. And they've been collecting human stories with audio and video for something like 20 years, categorizing, organizing. There are several other fancy technology things where you sit in front of like 150 cameras and you answer questions, and then the software, after the person or the contributor dies, for hundreds of years in the future, can offer an interactive dialogue with somebody so that they can get color and understanding about a certain situation. So we need to harvest more stories about the change people went through and what it meant for them, because that's what people will believe. That's the one thing I think we can do.
Yeah, harvesting stories. I love it. All right. I think that's a good place to kind of conclude there, unless it